Hey everybody, I'm Chef AJ, the creator of the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, and it is my great pleasure to introduce and interview one of the greatest minds in psychology today, Dr. Doug Lisle, who is the psychologist not only for the McDougall Live-In program, but also at True North Health, both located in Santa Rosa. And he's also the co-author of probably the greatest book ever written, The Pleasure Trap. Initially, Dr. Lisle was going to speak in person to our live group of people taking the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, but due to scheduling conflicts, he couldn't do it. So we're pre-recording this interview, and we have lots of questions on the subject of health and weight loss for Dr. Lisle. So welcome, Dr. Lisle, and thank you so much for doing this.
Great to be here, AJ.
Right. So, Dr. Lisle, these questions for you, they're going to be a no-brainer. You have answered these probably thousands of times. And I think any of the questions I ask you, you could probably take an hour to answer. But since I'd like to try to get to as many questions as possible from each participant, if you could maybe give just a little bit of a Reader's Digest version, and that way if people want to know more, I think they should book a session with you. It's so reasonable. You go on your wonderful website, esteemdynamics.org. You can watch all of Dr. Lisle's amazing videos that up until now you either had to purchase or go to a live program to see. And I mean, $75 for 30 minutes, it's ridiculous. I mean, everybody should be going to you. So please, guys, you know, he's amazing. And the thing I love about Dr. Lisle is you don't have to like go every single week for the rest of your life. You really are good at like focusing on what the problem is and getting to the nitty-gritty and helping people very quickly and affordably. So thank you so much for doing that.
My pleasure, AJ. All right, let's see what we got.
Okay, so, you know, you've helped me tremendously, and as you know, when I met you, I was 50 pounds heavier, and you told me what to do, and I did it, and now I'm skinny. So why everybody doesn't do what you say, what Dr. McDougall says, what Dr. Goldhammer says, I have no idea. Dr. McDougall spoke 2 weeks ago to our program, and a week ago we had Dr. Goldhammer. So he's like, you guys are like the, you know, like the triple threat here. We're ending with you. And even though Dr. McDougall basically told everybody to eat starch and that human beings can't do de novo lipogenesis, that we can't convert carbohydrate and protein to fat, people are still afraid not only to eat starch, but to eat it ad libitum, because there's many popular people teaching programs, some of them plant-based, that are basically saying that the only way you can lose weight is to either weigh and measure your food on a scale, including non-starchy vegetables, or eat 1,200 calories a day. And when I did what you said, I got skinny, and you kept saying, hey, you're not eating enough rice, you're not eating enough potato. Now, if you eat less than 4 cups of rice or a 2-pound potato, it's like you'll starve. And so you're a doctor. Can you please tell these people to eat?
Yes. I think probably, you know, at the risk of taking too wide of angle of view, what I want people to realize is that people are just another creature on Earth. Now, we're a spectacularly fancy one. We're the smartest one by far, and we are incredibly creative and ingenious. However, we're still just an animal. So if you look at, for example, how long an animal lives, you can sort of look at how many heartbeats it's going to have, and you can predict how long the average member of that species will live. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about a hummingbird, or we're talking about an aardvark, or we're talking about a chimpanzee or a human. It fits perfectly. So human beings fit well within all predicted norms of animal biology. There's nothing about human beings that is fancy about our biology, other than the fact that we've got a bigger brain than most other creatures per unit of body size. So that's our big fancy thing. Other than that, we're not that fast, we're not that quick. Anybody that thinks a basketball player is quick needs to go check out how cobras behave. They are, you know, obviously there is differences in species, and there are similarities in species, and we are just another species, which means that we don't have any weight problems that other species don't have. They have to automatically regulate their breathing just like we do. They have to automatically regulate their fluid intake just like we do. They have very sophisticated mechanisms to guide them to do this. They have feelings. So, for example, we're not the only animal that feels thirsty. We feel thirst just in the same way as other animals feel thirst. And we feel hunger in the same way that other animals feel hunger. And so what's going to happen is we are going to eat to what we call satiation, just like other animals eat to satiation. And the notion that you would have to eat less than satiation. You would have to eat beneath your level of satiation in order to be at a healthy weight is just ridiculous. You don't see that in any other animal in the animal kingdom. You won't find that is true. And so the notion that that is true for humans is absolutely ridiculous. So anybody that thinks that you have to consciously regulate your food intake is just not understanding animal biology, and or is thinking that human beings are independent of animal biology. Now, if you give rats, for example, a bunch of food that is overly rich for rats, so you give them bread or you give them chocolate, which are rich foods, then the average rat will gain 49% of its body weight in 60 days. So it will eat as much as it wants. It'll eat to satiation, and when it does that, it will be systematically overeating. The same thing is true of humans. So if you give human beings food that is overly rich for our species, then they will systematically overeat, and they will get fat. And they'll get fat depending upon how rich the food is, and depending upon also their own individual differences in their own biology. So there are going to be some of those rats aren't going to get overweight at all when you feed them bread and chocolate, because they're going to be skinny naturally rats, and they're always going to remain skinny no matter what they eat. But other rats may gain 100% of their body weight in that same 60 days. And so on average, it's about 50% of their body weight, but there's individual differences. So people need to learn that there's really two different ways to be at a healthy weight. One way is to eat trash, but to consciously override your hunger drive and eat less than you want. And that's what I call losing your mind. In other words, to eat less than you want in order to maintain a low weight or a healthy weight is the same thing as, for the rest of your life, consciously drinking less fluid than you want to drink. You know, that is, of course, ridiculous. And so the solution instead is to eat a diet that is consistent with the natural history of our species. And that diet is dominated by the famous McDougall starches, rice, beans, and potatoes. And so when people are eating an appropriate diet, they don't have this problem. When they wander into the weeds towards processed food, that's when they're going to wind up with a problem.
I agree with you, and one of the participants who actually is a medical doctor asked, is overeating an emotional psychological issue, or is it caused by the addictive hyperpalatable characteristics of these processed foods?
Yeah, it's interesting that people, to answer your question straight, it's because the food is overly pleasurable, and that's why people overeat it. People think that they eat for emotional reasons. They are mistaken fundamentally about how this works. You certainly eat for the pleasure of eating, and when you eat, it feels productive. However, you would not systematically overeat for any emotional reasons. The only way you're going to systematically overeat is going to be if you eat food that is overly rich, and therefore your system cannot calibrate how much to eat. People are very confused about the nature of satiety and how satiety works. So let me tell you what an average person thinks when they're trying to lose weight. If they eat a little bit of food, they can knock down their hunger, and they think, well, if I was a good girl right now, I don't have to eat any more than that right now. I could just push myself away from the table, and I'd be fine. This accomplishes absolutely nothing. There is no correct amount of food to eat. It does that. That is a misunderstanding in principle of how biology works. If you were to say, well, I'm just supposed to eat until I'm comfortably full and no more than that, and that's the right amount of food. Or some people will say, well, eat just a little bit less than you would be comfortable with. That's the right amount of food. Let me explain that there is no such thing as the right amount of food to eat right now. For what purpose? For the next hour? For the next hour and a half? For the next 2.5 hours? For the next 6 hours? For the next 5 hours and 42.5 minutes? What exactly is this food supposed to do? And how long is it supposed to be satisfying you until you eat again? There is no answer to that question. Let me explain how the biology works. If you were to cram yourself full of potatoes today, and you said, oh my God, I overeat, I will argue that you did not overeat. You overate to whatever level that your psychology said, what the heck, let's have a little bit more. I feel pretty full, but let me just have one more. That is not overeating, because what's going to happen is that it simply meant that your biology said that this is a perfectly good time and moment to go ahead and eat a little bit more because I'm perfectly comfortable. There's no predators around. There's food that's available right now. I still have a little bit of room in my stomach. Let me go ahead and put some more in there. Now, if you do that, what's going to happen is that if let's suppose there's one more potato and you decide to eat it or you decide to not eat it. If you decide to not eat it, this is the equivalent of not filling up your gas tank the last 2 gallons of gas. So you filled it up 3/4 and change, but you didn't fill it all the way to the top. And you might say to yourself, well, what a good boy I am. I didn't fill my gas tank all the way to the top. Okay? You realize that's ridiculous. It means that you're going to be having to buy gasoline sooner as a result of not having filled it up. Now, if you fill it all the way to the top, then you don't have to reach for the gas tank again as soon. That's simply how this works. So that when you, quote, cram yourself full of whole natural foods, what happens is you simply maximize out the glycogen stores that can be stored in your liver and in your muscles. And those glycogen stores are actually hooked up to your nervous system in a way that it will signal the hunger drive when they reach a particularly a low enough point. So let's suppose that you chomp down that last potato and you feel crammed full and it's 9 o'clock at night, and then when you wake up the next morning, you are going to have X amount of hunger drive. And you will have less hunger drive when you wake up in the morning as a result of you having eaten that potato than had you not eaten that potato. So what the system does is it's constantly adjusting its position, and it's constantly adjusting how much food that you're going to eat, and it does this with the hunger drive. And there is no such thing as eating the right amount today or this meal, because it's a constant process of readjustment. Okay? In the same way, it's like, well, when have you had the right amount of oxygen? When you took a breath and breathed a little bit 1% more, or wait a minute, it's 1% less? Or do you need to catch up a little bit, or did you just run up the stairs? And how long are we going to have to continue to breathe a little bit harder? The answer is highly unpredictable, and the system automatically works it out. And this is exactly how biology works. So the question is not how much do I need to eat today or at this meal. The question is how much am I going to need to eat this year? A year from today, this system will have worked it out perfectly if I'm on whole natural foods. But if I artificially added foods of artificial concentration and palatability, then what happens is that I will systematically overeat. That's true even if today all I eat is a Snickers bar. So if all I eat is a Snickers bar today, and you say, well, gee, Doug, you did a pretty good job. You just ate 380 calories today. You should lose weight. No, I won't lose weight. That Snickers bar now, what's going to happen is it's only being cataloged as probably about 250 calories, even though there's 380 calories in it. And so as a result, my brain doesn't know that it got an extra 130 calories because of the artificial concentration of the food. And so now this week, if I eat all the rest whole natural foods to satiation, I will have overeaten by 130 calories because of that mistake. Now, will that mistake get corrected? Yeah, eventually. The system, if I continue to eat whole natural foods, it will while away that extra 130 calories and I'll be out of trouble. But if I consistently eat foods that are where I systematically overeat, that's how you gain weight. You do not gain weight by eating too much whole natural food. It's just, I mean, there are a few cases in my career where I've seen that. There's some very, very unusual people, but they're rare. And it turns out, AJ, you weren't one of those people.
Thank God.
Yeah, you were a standard person that was eating healthy food, but the healthy food was unnatural because there was some unnatural richness to some of the foods that you were eating. Even though they were healthy foods, you were doctoring up your food, and just like a lot of very health-conscious vegans do. And as a result, you were systematically overeating. And lo and behold, I didn't know what your weight was, but let's see now.
165 when I met you, 115 now.
Okay, let's take 115 and multiply that by 1.49. What is that? Somebody has a calculator.
Yeah, I'll do it. Okay, let me do it. Yeah. I'm gonna. I didn't expect to have to do math today. 9. Oh boy, give me. Boy, you were the statistics professor. You don't know
That's about 40%.
Okay, let me get to
It's about what I'm saying is that 165. Actually, if you take
I got
165
my calculator. So you want me to do 115 or 165?
do 165 divided by 115.
165 divided by 115 equals 1.437.
You were 43.7% over your ideal weight.
Wow.
So you were, i.e., you had bread and chocolate in the cage.
Yeah, but for me it was not. It was peanut butter was my bread.
I knew it was peanut butter. I wasn't going to tell on you.
It's okay.
Yeah. The point is that we had artificially concentrated food in the cage, and you were eating that food along with your other food. And so just like the rats, we throw bread and chocolate in the cage. They eat some of their regular food, and then they eat the bread and the chocolate. And what do they wind up? 49% over their ideal weight. What did AJ wind up? 43.7% over ideal weight. What a shock this is, okay? And so this is how this problem works. And so when people are, now, there are going to be people that are frustrated by this discussion. They don't think it's true, except that if they come to True North Health Center and they actually eat the food here, they'll tell me that they're eating that food. But when they actually come to True North Health Center, they miraculously start to lose weight.
It's a miracle.
There happens to be a vortex in the space-time continuum right here at 1551 Pacific Avenue in Santa Rosa. I don't know how it works this way, but this is how it works.
It's amazing.
So they're eating exactly everything right, Dr. Lisle, but they're 38 pounds overweight, and they've been like this. They lost a bunch of weight as they changed their diet towards a healthier diet, so they lost 38 pounds, and then they're still 38 pounds overweight. But they're doing everything perfectly. And then they come to True North Health Center, and then we point them to the salad bar and the hot food bar where they can eat as much as they want, which they do. And when they do, miraculously, they start losing 2 to 3 pounds a week. It's absolutely amazing.
People will say, I do everything it says and I can't lose weight, but you send them to True North, and like you say, they all lose weight there. It's something just like you say, that magical vortex, I guess. So Dr. Lisle, what you said is fascinating. It also makes sense, but just to clarify, in case somebody's hearing the expression whole natural food for the first time, are you referring to the foods with a caloric density of 567 per pound or less, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, or are you also considering avocados, nuts, and seeds whole natural?
Very good question. I would consider avocados, nuts, and seeds to be whole natural food, except that they are an unusual whole natural food in that they are particularly rich, and as a result, we have to, in many people's cases, we have to limit them to some sane and reasonable amount. These are very rich foods that would not have been present 365 days a year for people in their natural history. They would have been occasionally available. People would have eaten them aggressively when they were available, but then they would not have had them. And so human beings have a mechanism, a very curious and important mechanism, and that is they have the ability to, when they eat rich foods, they have the ability to store up fat. So they might have their body weight go up by about 10% if they were eating their normal diet, but plus then we added some rich food to the diet for a period of time. What will then happen is that in order to adjust for this, what the system does is it actually will, as your fat stores start to grow, what happens is it actually influences your hunger drive. Your hunger drive starts to be dialed down a little bit, completely unconsciously. You would have no way of assessing this. And this is done through the hormone leptin. So the more fat stores that you have, as your fat stores start to become excessive, they start to become non-ideal for your health. What happens is that the leptin starts to signal to the hypothalamus that you should eat less, and it starts to shave off your hunger drive. Now, imagine what would happen in a typical scenario. So there's nuts and avocado or some other rich food that comes into an environment for 60 days. And so people, all the little people, start chomping down this food along with their other food. They don't eat it exclusively. They're still eating essentially a whole natural foods diet of normal calorie density, but now they're taking advantage of this high rich food. And so now they're chomping down on some of this food. and now 2 months later, they've now gained 10 pounds. So the woman that was 115 pounds is now 125. She's been gorging herself on this food. Now the food is out of the environment. It's no longer present. And what's going to happen is that she will slowly lose this weight. So over the next few months, we're going to find that her hunger drive, let's suppose that on average she used to eat 1,700 calories. Now she's going to be eating 1,600 calories, but she'll never know it. She'll be slowly burning off that extra 100 calories off of her fat stores, and she'll head right back down to 115 pounds. And this is the process that people will go through. Now, if they maintain a high concentration of these foods, 365 days a year, then what they will see is they'll simply sit at a higher equilibrium. So that same woman, instead of being 115 pounds come the winter, she'll be 125. If she continues to eat the rich food, she'll just be 125 all year long. And so that's how that's going to work. So that's why we tell people these foods should not be eaten to satiety as much as you want. They should be systematically limited so that we are not eating enormous quantities of them so that we don't wind up with a permanently high equilibrium.
That makes a lot of sense, but I just want to reiterate that the whole natural foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, they can and should be eaten to satiety, and it's actually important to do that, because my next question is about stress eating and binging. We have two similar questions, and I'll read them both because I'm pretty sure what you're going to say the answer is. Yeah. But one participant says, what is the most effective way, i.e. the very first thing one should do, to quell or quiet an urge to binge? And someone else similarly asks, what is the best way Dr. Lisle has seen over the years to not stress eat or to stop once you started? I think I know what the answer is, but when you say it, they're going to believe it.
Right. What will cause people to binge is when they get really hungry. And they get hungry and there's no healthy food around. So what they're going to binge on is they're going to binge on high concentrated junk food. And you can eat a tremendous quantity of food. You're very capable of eating a couple of pounds of food, which is a lot. You could even, in principle, probably eat 3 pounds of food. Now, if you eat 3 pounds of carrots, you're going to eat 600 calories. There's not going to be a problem. And trust me, you're not going to eat 3 pounds of carrots because it's not that interesting. You could eat 3 pounds of potatoes. Not that interesting. And you're not going to do it, which would be 1,500 calories. But you could also eat 3 pounds of ice cream. And 3 pounds of ice cream can also fit in there, but when you do that, you're going to be eating, well over 1,000 calories. Could be a tremendous amount of calories. I think 3 pounds of ice cream could be on the order of 3,500, 4,000 calories.
Right, it's 1,200 calories a pound ice cream.
Right. So you could be 3,000 or 4,000 calories easily. So when people binge, they do not binge on whole natural food. They binge on some kind of food that's been doctored up. And they're going to binge when they are hungry, and so the solution to binge eating is to have healthy food available and eat that healthy food first. So I have a simple rule when if we're in intelligent environments and we don't have a bunch of junk food around, then this isn't going to be a problem. I mean, go ahead and binge with whatever's in the kitchen. There isn't anything in there that's illegal. So, but if you're in another environment where there is food that's available, you've got barbecue potato chips, you've got French fries, you've got all kinds of things around that are very, very exciting, very pleasurable food because they're so rich. If you have that in your environment, and you have where binge eaters usually come from is from a determined conscientiousness to lose weight. So what happens is that most of your binge eaters actually are people with a fair amount of competitive drive. They want to lose weight. And what they do is that they will grit their teeth and restrict themselves because they feel a growing victory with every hour that passes that they don't eat. And so they're essentially trying to get through a day and eating minimally because they think that that's how they're going to lose weight. Interestingly enough, when you do that, folks, you do not lose any fat at all. If you go through a day and you eat very little food, all that happens is you use up the glycogen that is stored in your liver and in your muscles. That's all you do. You don't burn any fat at all. That's not how that's going to work. Okay? And so, but they don't know this. So they believe that the right solution to their weight loss program that they've just decided again today to really get serious about is to eat less than they want. So now they've eaten less than they wanted, and so now they're a hungry animal. And if they're a hungry animal anywhere within sight of food, then rich food, they are highly motivated to go after that rich food. Every memory circuit in them is telling them that that rich food is the most valuable thing for their survival, i.e. the most pleasurable thing. And so they're going to go for that food, and then once they start eating it, because it is hyper exciting, because it's artificial, they're extremely motivated to continue to eat it till it's gone. So if it's a box of Entenmann's cookies, or it's a whole bunch of Doritos, or ice cream, whatever it is, they're going to eat a hell of a lot of that food. They'll typically eat it till it's gone. And people can easily eat, 3-4 pounds of food, of very rich food, and they can eat 6,000 or 8,000 calories in a sitting. And then they feel disgusted, and then some of them will vomit. So then we get bulimia. Mm-hmm. But binge eating, when it doesn't involve bulimia, it winds up being very bulimia-like. Okay? In other words, it's this constant oscillation of restriction, willpower, and then you have to know that the longer you go and the hungrier you are, the more and more your willpower is dropping. And as a result of that, you are becoming more and more unable to actually execute behavior that's in your best interest. And so you also have to realize that junk food is way generally easier to eat than unprocessed whole natural food. There are some exceptions, like fruit is pretty easy to eat. It doesn't get too much easier than fruit. But getting a large amount of calories quickly is fruit is not any good thing, because you got to eat a whole pound of it to get 250 or 300 calories. Whereas if you're going to eat some Cheetos, you can get 300 calories very, very quickly with very, very little chewing or very little effort. Mm-hmm. So it turns out that when people are quite hungry and there's junk food around, that's when they binge. So the solution to the problem of binging is, number one, you must understand that the way to lose weight is not to try to deny yourself a comfortable amount of food. That's what the first problem is. The second problem is you then need to know that when you're hungry, you have basically one goal that must be met. You must eat something healthy first. When you eat something healthy first, you take an edge off the hunger drive and reestablish your ability to actually essentially make more appropriate choices.
Yeah, that makes sense, because some of the people that I've sent to you have said that they've done your strategy where, like, they started binging and then they remember what you said, so then they ate some beans or potatoes and crisis averted.
Right, and it's always generated by it's generated by generally by restriction.
Right. Yeah, I've never met somebody that did binge that didn't restrict. It seems. And some of them are not. They don't self-induce vomiting, but they over-exercise. And then I know, as somebody new to exercise, the days I exercise, I'm even hungrier. I eat more, and yet they're exercising more, eating less, which I think is making them hungrier.
Yeah, people set these traps for themselves because they don't trust their own satiety mechanisms, because they have failed before.
Right.
And so as a result, this is generally born of very determined conscientiousness to try to lose weight and to get in better physical condition. And as a result, what happens is that they know one thing for sure. They have an underlying appreciation for the gross mathematics, which says if I eat less and I exercise more, I will lose weight. That is true. However, that is a miserable way to go about the process. And it is a very dangerous way to go about the process, because a person doing that is exceedingly likely to relapse often along the way into binging cycles.
Right.
And so we want to, in order to beat this problem, you have to trust that we have an underlying logic to what it is that we're talking about that you can follow and that you can expect success. Now, another thing that I want to point out, AJ, is when a lot of people are trying to lose weight, they have a very bizarre mathematical system inside their head. People feel like if they do a real good job and work on a problem for about 3 weeks, it ought to be over. Like the concept that if you've got 40 pounds to lose, it's likely to take 6 or 8 months is just completely outside of people's conscious ability to grasp. So they are desperate to get rid of the weight. They want to get rid of it, and they want to get rid of it right now. And if they batten down the hatches and actually grind for 3 or 4 days on the problem, they feel like they ought to have it about half done. Okay? So everybody's in a rush, and they get demoralized when they look at the scale, and the scale hasn't gone down at all, or it's gone down a pound in a week. And they do not appreciate that you have to be a tortoise about this. This needs to be, this isn't a dramatic, determined, overwhelming, like I'm going to like do this and do this and do this and have it all done. No, the issue is we're making changes. We're going to make changes, and we're going to make them consistently, and we're going to keep at this, and we're making these permanently. And as we do this, people will slowly, their bodies will return them to a healthy equilibrium. And it may take 4 months, or it may take a year and 4 months. But this is we're not going to get rid of a 40-pound problem in 6 weeks. It's just not going to happen.
Well, what people forget, Dr. Lisle, because people sometimes are meeting me now as a thin person, it took me 27 months to lose these 47 pounds. And so, you know.
Very good. I'm glad that you kept track of this.
I did. Oh, perfectly.
Fantastic. So this is all I care about when it comes to the scale is if we look at it on a month-to-month basis, is it moving in the right direction? And so I want to see that, you know, if a person says they're doing a good job and they're 40 pounds overweight, and then a month later they're still the same 40 pounds overweight, then that is evidence that we're not doing the job well enough. But if they are down 2 pounds, then they are definitely on their way. Now they might be down 6 pounds. They might be down 4 pounds. But what I care about is the direction. And I just care that people are headed the right direction, and that if we get evidence that you are doing well enough, then we continue. And we might hit, for example, a person that is doing a pretty good job, they might lose 3 or 4 pounds a month for 4 or 5 months, and then they might stop. So they might lose 20 pounds, but they still got 30 pounds to lose. And then they stop. And that tells us, okay, you've now hit equilibrium, which means that we are above the weight that we want to be at, which means that our diet is a little too rich. And so we now need to go back and tweak those details to get us moving in the right direction again.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up about weighing, because we don't really encourage people to weigh themselves, certainly not every day or even every week, but they seem to be addicted to the scale much in the same way they are processed foods, and often the weighing just makes them feel bad about themselves and then causes them to eat, which is counterproductive to their goal.
Correct. So this is why, unfortunately, the scale is the feedback system that people believe in, and that's the score that they're looking for. Now, what I want people to do is I want them to do it differently. I want them to change the scorekeeping mechanism that they're using. So I want them to have a little check sheet where they have, I call it starch targets, where we have starch, 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 fruit, salad, and exercise. So we have 6 targets that we're supposed to try to hit. And we do this on a weekly basis. So day to day we're hitting these things, and then we total it at the end of a week from Saturday to Saturday. And so there's 42 starch targets a week. Starch, 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 fruit, salad, exercise. And I don't put vegetables in there because I hope everybody knows that you can eat all the vegetables in the world that you want, and that's all a good thing. But what I'm trying to get people to do is eat a little bit of salad, and I want fruit in there because I want them to not leave that as an option. So a lot of times people are afraid that fruit is sugary and it's going to make you fat, and it's not going to make you fat. And I want people to do some exercise. I don't mean going to the gym for an hour. I mean even 15, 20 minutes, take a walk. Okay, that this is a valuable thing to do every day, not so much for the calorie burning incidentally, but it's more actually for your self-esteem. If you do a good job and you hit your starch target, starch means some starch-based meal. So if you eat 3 starch-based meals, maybe you only eat 2 in a day, that's fine. Then if you only eat 2 meals that day and both of them were starch-based and you didn't eat some third naughty meal, then you give yourself 3 check marks, okay, for the 3 starch targets. Now, the notion here is that we're going to try to hit 80% of the targets a week. So we're actually trying to get you to hit 34 out of the 42. Now, that's what our goal is. So for a month when we get started, we're trying to hit 80% of these starch targets across that 30-day period for 4 weeks. Now, if we did, then we look at the scale. And if we look at the scale and the scale is even or it's up a pound, then I know that you did those things right, but you did a lot of naughty stuff that we're going to have to talk about. Because I don't know what you did, but you did something, okay? Now, if you did hit those starch targets, and let's suppose the person dropped 4 or 5 pounds. Now, this is incredibly useful for people to see this, because now what they do is I want them to just focus on the starch targets. Forget the scale. We already know what the connection is between the behavior and the weight, because we already established that. So now we do the same thing the next month, and what we're after on a daily basis is to hit 5 out of 6 of our starch targets, or at least 4. And so we keep directed at this very, very small goal that's in front of us, and these are the building blocks to success in this arena. What I want people to do is effectively get lost in the process. I want them to be more interested in their starch target score than they are in their weight score. And so they know that it's headed the right direction, and all we're paying attention to is the 10 yards right in front of us. We're not looking out a mile down the road. That's a disaster, because your weight in any 3 or 4 or 5 day period can fluctuate quite a lot behind hormones, fluid, etc. And so I have people that it's very difficult to get them to stay on a consistent diet, because they're scale monkeys. They just can't get away from the scale. They just crawl around the scale, and they swing from the trees, and they drop down, and they have to peek at the scale. They're looking at the scale, looking at the scale, looking at the scale, as if this is the evidence of whether you're doing things right or wrong. It is not. Your scale will go up and down according to so many variables that have nothing to do with the fat content on your body. How much fluid is in your system is one. Another one is how much material is in your digestive tract and in your colon. Also, another issue is how much glycogen do you have stored in your liver and in your muscles. So these things, fluid is a major change from day to day. How much fecal material you have in you is a big difference from day to day. And how much glycogen you have in your system is different from day to day. You can easily fluctuate, a few percent and not have any fluctuation in your fat content. And so this is a disaster when people are trying to correlate their dietary behavior on a day-to-day basis with their fat content on their bodies by looking at the scale. It is a disaster for people to be transfixed or believing in this. It is not a reliable measurement. The reliable measurement is month to month to the scale, and the way to be paying attention on a day-to-day basis is to be paying attention to the specifics of your behavior that I talk about in Starch Targets. So that's how you want to be focused, on a very simple check sheet that you can just look at, every day and check them off in your mind. That's how I want people to do it.
I love that, scale monkeys, because that's what I'm going to start calling these people. I'm going to go, whoo, 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 because we don't recommend weighing. And the gentleman that I run the program with, John Pierre, he's even more against the scale than that. He says if you're going to know, then do the body impedance analysis where you really know what you're measuring, that the scale really does tell you nothing. So that was very helpful, and I thank you. You had mentioned environment earlier, and I'm curious, how critical do you think a person's environment is to their ultimate success when trying to affect permanent dietary and lifestyle change?
I think it's the most important thing.
Thank you.
I tell people to work harder on their environment than they do on themselves. People are mystified as to the causes of why it is that they are struggling with this issue. They talk to psychologists, they go to a shrink, they talk to their counselor, they talk to to the thin lady who says how she's got her life together and how, etc. In other words, they listen to Dr. Phil, they listen to Oprah about how she had early childhood problems that caused this. This is all crazy. This is all human beings. This is like a bunch of monkeys trying to play football. They have no idea what they're looking at or what they're talking about. They believe that these problems are psychological in derivative. They are not. The problem is environmental. Okay? We are not a bizarre species that has a bunch of bizarre psychological problems that just landed on this species since 1970, and only in the United States and the Western world. Okay? And then somehow these same problems then got manufactured and started to spontaneously develop in American Samoa about 1995 and the Dominican Republic by the year 2000. This is not how this works. Okay? This is an environmental problem. It is the environment that is the problem. It is not your psychology. Your psychology is very simply designed. It is designed to seek out the richest food in the environment. That is the only intelligent way to build an animal, is to have that system in there. That's how you minimize your energy expenditure in pursuit of the energy that you need to survive. Any other system would be a failure biologically. So that is the system you have. That is the system that a red ant has. That is the system that the aardvark has, and that is the system that your house cat has. If you feed the richest food to the animal, it will choose that over the less rich food. What we've done to people is we have now put artificially rich food everywhere in their environment. And to actually get to natural food, you have to go to a bunch of hassle and a bunch of planning. So the problem is the environment. The problem is not you are weak-willed. The problem is not that you have psychological buried problems from your childhood. The problem is not that there's anything wrong with you at all. The problem isn't that you eat for emotional reasons. This is not the issue. The issue is we have overly rich food in the environment. That is the problem. Okay? That overly rich food outcompetes whole natural food. The most important thing that you can do to enhance your success is to try to live in an environment, in your home and in your social environment with who it is that your friends are, to try to do your eating and your living within contexts where healthy eating is very easy to do, and unhealthy eating requires effort to do it. That's why rule number one for healthy living is to have no junk food in the house.
Thank you.
Because if the junk food is in the house, you're going to eat that first.
Thank you. I've been saying that for years. If it's in your house, it's in your mouth.
Oh, there you go.
Right. So it is possible, though, that people do have emotional problems, though,
of course,
which is one of your specialties. And one of the questions from the participant is that how come when I feel angry or lonely or stressed or tired or bored, I want to overeat, and I want to overeat on sweet or salty or fatty foods that make me feel instantly better, but in the long term more upset? Yeah.
Well, here's what it is. That when you are hungry or angry or lonely or tired, you are actually experiencing a lot of what we're going to call cognitive dissonance. You are struggling mentally, and that mental struggle has actually depleted the glucose in your brain. So in fact, you are hungry, even though you don't know you're hungry. And so as a result, it is a good idea to eat. Notice that we don't do other things when we are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. We do not, for example, turn on the fireplace and sit in front of it for half an hour. That's not that appealing, okay? We do not, necessarily go take a shower. We do not necessarily go to a little oxygen bottle and start breathing extra rich oxygen. These are not the things that we do, okay? Eating is inherently productive behavior. And so people will not actually, when they are hungry, angry, or lonely, or tired, they do not go to the kitchen and cut up a bunch of Brussels sprouts and carrots and steam them and then start eating them like crazy. That is not what they do. If we watch, quote, emotional eating that people do, what they do is that they are drawn to junk food. Mm-hmm. Okay? And now you say, well, I'm eating for emotional reasons. Well, not exactly. The truth is that it is the hyper activation of the pleasure pathways by virtue of pleasure trap food. That is having a drug-like effect on the system. And you are likely to do that if that food is around. If you're hungry, if you're completely fine and happy, or if you're also unhappy. In other words, when you're unhappy, you're actually getting a signal from your nervous system to do something to improve your survival and reproductive possibilities. That is what you're being told to do, okay? Now, you will scan your environment and you will say, what could I do to increase my likelihood of survival? Or what could I do to increase my likelihood of reproduction? And so we would expect that your behavior would be driven towards one of those goals, and it is. And so the most valuable thing your Stone Age brain knows how to do when you're for a survival problem is to eat artificially rich food. Okay? That's what it's going to do. There is no oxygen deprivation in nature. There is no sleep deprivation in nature. But there is calorie deprivation in nature. You can literally starve to death. So, of course, the system is designed by nature to be scanning when it feels a little bit of threat for something productive to do. And you know what? You would. If you had whole natural food around and you were a little bit hungry, you'd eat some of it. And then that would be the end of it. But why do you eat a lot of it? You eat a lot of it because it's not whole natural food. That's what emotional eating isn't emotional eating on whole natural food. Emotional eating is a drug hit that comes from artificial foods. And we will do that not only when we are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. We'll do that anytime.
Amen. You know, I've tried I tried emotional eating on whole natural food, but I got too full.
Yeah, and you get bored.
Yeah, it's like it's not. That's
your nervous system knows that let's suppose you're real depressed because you're some 25-year-old kid and your girlfriend just broke up with you. Okay, and so do you really think that the nervous system is so stupid that it says, well, Joe, I'll tell you how we're going to fix this problem of your survival and reproductive problems, which in this case it's a reproductive problem. Okay, so Mimi just broke up with you. So, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go stuff myself with a bunch of carrots. It's like, no, that is not what the nervous system does. What the nervous system does is it goes and cries to its friend, okay? Goes and talks to his old girlfriend, talks to his big sister about how he just got dumped. He goes and tries to get information. He goes and tries to talk to Mimi again and writes her a poem. See what I'm saying? In other words, the system is smart enough to figure out how to motivate you to do things that will statistically increase your likelihood of success in the world. When people seek out junk food, they don't just seek it out under those circumstances when they're being challenged. They absolutely seek it out at all times. They are not nearly as savvy about figuring it out that they're seeking it out at all times, which they do. Okay, they do notice, however, that if let's look at the situation where let's have some guy or some gal that's 30 or 40 pounds overweight, and they're getting kind of negative feedback from the sexual arena, whatever their proclivities, and so they're getting some negative feedback, and it's got them depressed, and so then the depression, they're seeking for a way to feel better. One of those ways to feel better is to go hit up some artificially drug-like food. So they do, except they also know that it caused them to be fat, so now they even feel worse afterwards, right? Mm-hmm. All true, okay? But the point is that what did they not do? They did not go eat a bunch of whole natural foods.
Right.
That's not what happened. So where is this emotional eating? Okay? It's not emotional eating. It's drug-seeking behavior. It's different. And people need to understand you don't eat for emotional reasons. You do drugs for emotional reasons. Different.
I am so blown away by your brilliance in general, but in this topic specifically, if they gave Academy Awards for understanding human behavior as it applies to weight loss, this would be the Oscar-winning performance today.
Oh,
So
You're
it's
sweet.
so good. So your good friend Alan Goldhammer spoke to us last week, and I had said to him that once you gave me this information, I did what you said, and I got slender. And he said that's basically because I'm a disagreeable bitch. As nicely as we could. And so I have noticed, and he said that the more agreeable the person is, the more difficult this journey is going to be. And I have noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it seems that the more people-pleasing a person is, particularly a woman, the more overweight they are. And that seems to be the majority of the people that come to me for help. So how do we help these very nice, highly agreeable people with this unnatural problem?
Alan's got a way of putting things, AJ. The problem of being an agreeable personality with respect to this problem is huge, and it's way underestimated and not even close to appreciated. We appreciate it because this is what we've done for 35 years at True North is try to figure this problem out, and we have watched the extraordinary odysseys of people as they contort their lives in ways to try to get out of this knot. One of the big problems that people have asked Alan over the years is, yes, but what about when I go to my friend's house for dinner? And of course, Alan looks at them in horror, like,
What's
"You
a
have
friend?"
friends? What? We'll get rid of them. Who needs those things? So absolutely, it's much easier for people if they're inherently disagreeable. Um, if you are a nice person, and God forbid you're a nice person who's also sociable and likes to hang around with people. Some people are nice people, but they're introverts, so this isn't as big of a problem. But if you're more extroverted or you're normal and you're a nice person, this is going to be very difficult. And so we need tools, literally things to say. We have to have scripts to actually weasel our way around these problems. And so that's what I've shot videos on. So Getting Along Without Going Along, it's been recorded in a few different versions. But the one that's on the one that is on a DVD that I've done called The Willpower Paradox is one that I would direct people to. Sooner or later we'll get this thing, online for free, but I don't think we have it. I don't think we have it online for free now. We might. People need to check my website and esteemdynamics.org. There may be a version on there. I can't remember. But the point here is that we actually have to learn some things. And it isn't complicated. It's if you memorized a poem for school in the 4th grade, then this is about the level of effort that it takes to learn some of these lines. It takes some repetition. It's going to take you, half an hour of memorization and sort of getting used to it and then trying out a few times. But there are some lines that I have, and there are these strategies that they sound very simple, but actually they're pretty sophisticated in how it is that we're doing this and why we're doing it this way. One of the big things that we are trying to tell people is that we wish we could, but we can't. And then if they're going to say, why is that? We're going to say, well, I'm running this experiment. Okay, that I made a promise to myself I was going to run this experiment and see how this goes until my birthday. We pick a date out a couple months, no longer than that. The reason why we do this is because we're not telling people that we've made some permanent lifestyle change, because then we're going to open up a big fight, and only the disagreeable people can run that gauntlet. Okay, but if you're a nice person, you don't want to run that gauntlet. So what you want to do is you want to clear a path out in front of you for that social situation and in the near future, where you say you're running an experiment, and rather than tout anybody that is on our side here, Dr. Esselstyn says, or Dr. Campbell, or Dr. McDougall, or Dr. Goldhammer, like, forget it. We're not going to sell any of us. You just say, Dr. Campbell had this thing, and seems like there's some good ideas there. Not sure he's right about everything. So we're always going to take back some of the esteem. Like Dr. McDougall, I went to this thing. It was very interesting. Not sure he's right about everything. Okay, so we say that, but I'm going to try it until until my anniversary, you know, in June 5th, and I'm just seeing how it goes. So far, so good. And so this is what we do. We do things like this. So there's a number of strategies that I talk about, but these are the ways that nice people can essentially put a barrier around them to protect them from the social attack that they're going to get. We make these things experiments. We make them temporary. We also make them with humility. Like, we're not so sure they're right, but we're trying it. We're going to find out what happens. So far, it seems okay. Okay? This is what we do. We act like this is another diet or something we're trying. And everybody's allowed to try a wacky diet anytime they want. What we don't do is we don't try to defend this scientifically. We don't try to explain that it's better. We don't do anything of the kind. That's a total waste of time and nothing but trouble for a nice person to get into. That is a place for people that have a lot more sharp teeth in their head. If you've got a bunch of sharp teeth in your head, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
Like
just
me.
feels good, doesn't it?
I love taking a bite out of them.
There you go. That's all fair. If that's you, then it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But if it is not you, then don't try to walk that walk. Walk a little bit different path.
Yeah, this is so helpful. And I just went to your website. There are 8 of your amazing lectures, but the willpower paradox is not one of them.
No, but what about getting along without going along? Is that on there?
Yes, it is, as is
Good.
the perfect personality. So those would be helpful for people to watch.
Good. Excellent.
This is an interesting question of someone who's actually Chinese wrote it, and I bet you'll know the answer. She said, back in old China, when there was no Western foods, locals ate primarily rice. However, northern China ate more flour products, and southern China ate more rice products. But the northern Chinese were not heavier than the southern, even though the northern ate more noodles, bun bao, dumplings, pancake-type dishes. So why weren't they overweight when they ate a lot of flour products? Granted, they ate a lot of
because they weren't eating enough. The amount of flour products they were eating relative to the amount of vegetable matter that they were eating did not put them over any natural equilibrium for humans.
Wow.
So human beings are capable of eating some processed food and some rich food and not overeating it. It's just when you go too far over the line that it's a problem.
And you know you've gone too far over the line if you're overweight, right?
That's correct.
That's a good. So I just want to briefly revisit, because even though I intuitively know what you say to be true, so you phrase it in a little bit different way this time about how you really can't overeat. I love the gas tank analogy, that sometimes if we only have $10 on us, we don't fill our car all the way. And so with that, I want to just briefly touch on the work of Dr. Barbara Rolls from Penn State. She studied calorie density, and because I never could figure out how she could say that if we keep the average calorie density of the food we eat today to 567 per pound or less, which is fruit, vegetables, whole grains, we could eat ad libitum. But what you're saying is, if we eat a lot more one day, we're going to just naturally eat less the next day if it's the whole natural food at that calorie density, which is why, I feel like I do stuff myself like a pig every day with potatoes and vegetables, and it's easy for me to eat 2 pounds of potatoes and a pound of broccoli for lunch, and I'll say, oh my God, how did I eat so much food? But I'm thin, so I'm not eating too much food.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes people they're also not used to just what massive quantities of food people can eat if it's at lower calorie density.
Yeah, and that's why it's so fun.
Yes.
I mean, for me it is. I assume that there are other people, especially that are volume eaters, that would really, love this way of eating.
Sure.
You don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm just curious, because when we talked about the people, at least the people in our program that suffer with binge eating, a few of them I look at them and they're completely normal weight to me, yet they want to be thinner. And yet there's people in the program who are quite thin, who still see themselves as overweight, and there's people that I would categorize as overweight or obese that don't think they're overweight at all. So what makes people not really be in touch with what they truly look like?
Well, people have a lot of different agendas. And so some of your thin people, we could talk briefly about how you could wind up with some people sort of miscalibrated in this way. That I want you to think of a man that is 6 feet tall and 450 pounds. Mm-hmm. So, and let's suppose he's not a big pro wrestler. So it's not that he doesn't have a bunch of muscle. He's just round. Okay, now we look at people that look like that, and we say, essentially, undisciplined, out of control, slob, okay? The contours of their body look sloppy, and so as a result, we think of them as indulgent and out of control. So now, picture in your mind's eye of essentially a bunch of people on a continuum. So we have people that look like that on one end, and we say out of control, poor self-control, not smart, basically unkempt, okay? Low esteem. Now we move to somebody who is a little bit overweight, and we say, not too bad, socially acceptable, fine, little bit self-indulgent, etc. Now we go to somebody who is what we would consider ideal weight. They look great. We say, hey, they look great. They've really got it together. Now you can see with those kinds of inferences about people's psychologies, even though none of it needs to be true. In other words, almost all the slender people in the United States didn't deserve it. They're eating the same trash everybody else is eating. They just got slightly different genetics. There are people that have earned it, like yourself, AJ, but most people haven't. So most of the thin people that you're going to see eat the same foods that everybody else eats. They eat the same food as the 450-pound guy. But because we have these psychological inferences, what's going to happen is some people who are naturally very competitive are going to say, well, if it's true that I'm seeing a continuum here that goes from you're unkempt to you're sort of a little bit unkempt to you've got it together. Guess what? The next dot, the A plus, is to be even thinner than the person who we would consider to be excellent weight. And so this will, in some people's minds, hyper-conscientious people, very competitive people, will actually make this a personal crusade that they're going to be even thinner than everybody else. And this is where you get some problems. So this is where people have sort of, you can think of yourself, AJ, you're pretty tall. How tall are you?
5'6".
Okay, 5'6", 115. That's thin, but right within ranges of sort of excellent, all the way to 100, 130. You know what I'm saying? Anywhere 110 would be very thin, but still reasonable. 130 would be still pretty good shape. Anything in there. So 115 is, you've done an excellent job, and this is where your genetics landed you. Now, you can imagine, though, a slightly different personality that actually said, well, if 115 is so great, 105 will be better.
That's what Mary McDougall weighs.
Yeah, and Mary McDougall does not do this behind any ferocious competitiveness. She just happens to be that genetically, okay? And so God forbid anybody puts that as some kind of ideal, because that's just a genetically unusual human.
Yeah.
And so but you can see how people could sort of get this bit between their teeth, and then they're in some trouble. So now they're in a restricting, sort of obsessive process, and that's one reason that you can get some of these unusual visions of where it is that people ought to be.
Interesting.
All I can say to the people that are somewhat overweight and think that they're fine, all I can say is, God bless you, good enough. I'm just going to try to convince you to eat healthy enough to keep your arteries clean, and forget it.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not troubling you.
Oh, yeah, you're so sweet. You're cute. I really don't have any more questions on weight loss, but I have a very quick one on something that you told us about, which is the Oncoblot blood test.
Yes.
And one of the participants who's had sessions with you wants to just clarify that we can or should be doing that now instead of mammograms and colonoscopies. Is it safe, or what do you think about that?
Okay, somebody must have heard me talk about this. Yeah, I'm not saying too much publicly, but I will talk about it here at True North. There's a thing in the world called the oncoblot, ONCOBLOT, and the oncoblot is a blood test now for cancer, and so this is quite a scientific innovation. Now, uh, John McDougall would say, don't do it because it's going to basically get people all worried about their diseases and they're more worried about the test than it's going to encourage a bunch of treatment that people don't need. And he's got a point, and I cannot argue with his logic because that's exactly what happened with mammograms. You know what I'm saying? So this is he has a point. At the same time, though, if you can keep your head about you and not if you've got enough sort of natural emotional stability and natural I don't know what, if you can keep this in perspective, an oncoblot could be an extraordinary device. An oncoblot appears to be able to detect cancers far ahead of other means. So, for example, in breast cancer, by the time a breast cancer is detectable, there's about 2 billion cells, but an oncoblot can detect it when there's about 2 million cells, or it's about 1/1000th the growth of the tumor. So this is going to cause over the next, couple 3 decades, a lot of innovation in cancer treatment and research. It's going to enable us to try to figure out what may work very, very early before the cancer gets ahead of steam. And so I think, I think almost always, but not always, more knowledge is better. And so I have enormous respect for Dr. McDougall, and I expect that he will not like this new thing in the world, and he'll have a million people asking him about it, and people will be crawling all over him like ants when this gets to be more widespread known. But this is coming, and so if it's not the oncoblot, it's going to be something else. I personally think that this is a potentially very useful tool already. That there are people who may have little incipient cancers right now that would be treatable effectively, depending upon the cancer, if it was caught early, but not treatable if it was caught later. And so, but this is I would encourage people to, you can go to the oncoblot website, and I wouldn't be rushing out to get yourself an oncoblot today, but it would be something to file away in the back of your mind as something to look into in the future as you consider it and think about it. It will probably be standard in insurance companies' coverage within a couple 3 years. It is not yet now. So currently it costs $850. But all I could tell you is it's quite an innovation scientifically.
Wow, that's fantastic. This has just been, I could talk to you forever, and I don't want to keep you any longer, but if you could just if you have any closing thoughts, how we can inspire the people that are struggling because of their weight and have struggled for so long, and just, if they just knew how good they would feel if they could solve this problem, and that the solution is just eat starch and stay off the scale. I mean, it's really that easy, but how do you're the doctor, just tell them.
Yeah, I think that this is a very demoralizing problem. And everywhere you turn, people are going to be trying to give you a trick. And they're also going to be trying to explain the problem in a way that it isn't true. So they're going to explain it on your psychological deficiencies, or they're going to be trying to sell you a trick. And what we have to realize is that being overweight is a little bit like, it's kind of like you're in a semester math course in college, and you're about 4 weeks into the course, and you haven't been studying, and you've done poorly on a couple of quizzes. So you're in trouble. You're behind. Okay? Now, the way out is not to, go try to sleep with the teacher. Okay? The way out is not to bribe the TA. The way out is not to, get some math lessons in your head while you're asleep through some sleep learning program. No. The way is to get some help and break this problem down into the fundamentals and start doing problems and having a tutor maybe help you when you get into a problem and then learn your way around that problem. The problem is very logical, and if you learn these skills methodically, you will get through that math class. Now, you may not get an A in the class because there may not be time, but you may get an A next semester when we get to start from scratch. But you may only wind up with a B at the end of the semester, but you don't have to fail. And in the same way, with this problem, if you're overweight, it means that your diet has been too rich for our species, that you've been encouraged by your own biology and by the environment into doing essentially C or D work, okay? And you're behind, but you don't have to remain behind. If you start studying and doing the fundamentals, you can catch up with the rest of the class, and in fact, you can do better than the rest of the class. Okay, so, but it requires a patience and an identification of what the real problem is, and don't be chasing shortcuts.
Wow. You know, if you hadn't already written a book on this, I was going to say you really should, because you're brilliant. And thank you so much for your time. If you are lucky enough to be viewing this video, run, don't walk to esteemdynamics.org. Watch the 8 wonderful videos there and sign up for a consultation with Dr. Lisle. You will be glad you did. Dr. Lisle, we just love you so much. You're adorable and you're brilliant, and I'm so glad I met you. I don't know if you had a chance to watch my McDougall talk yet. You have to, because it's all about you. Did you know that? Did you watch it?
I've heard a bunch of people tell me.
You need to. I will pay you to watch it because
Scout's honor, I'm going to get to it.
But it's all about you. You were the rainmaker in this. You did
all right,
this.
I better watch it.
You're the Dr. Frankenstein. So thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. We have to do this again. There were more questions, but I was afraid to ask them because they were about like the ego trap and things like that I know if once you started it would be hours. So we'll have you back again. And thank you, Dr. Tolosa, for being the tech wizard that you are in Dallas. We're in 3 different cities. This is just absolutely amazing. And hopefully the 3 of us will be in the same city again soon.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.